History remembers what it chooses, but behind the pages of accepted truth lies a hidden lineage, forgotten, scattered, and rewritten. What if the ancient Israelites weren't lost? They were buried beneath layers of political identity, migration, and religious transformation. To truly understand the mystery of the Israelites, we have to start in the Levant, a crossroads of ancient civilizations. This is where the tribes of Israel first emerged, not in European castles or medieval temples, but in rugged lands that echo with Semitic memory. The Israelites were Semitic people. That word Semitic doesn't refer to a religion or race in the modern sense. It's a linguistic and ethnic grouping, and it places the Israelites side by side with ancient Arabs, Assyrians, Chaldeans, and Ethiopians, peoples with shared language roots, skin tones, and tribal traditions. In Egyptian records, Israelites are depicted with brown skin, woolly or curly hair, bearded faces, and tribal clothing. Not one image resembles the pale European figures painted centuries later in Renaissance cathedrals. The disconnect is staggering. We were taught that biblical patriarchs were clean, dignified, almost royal. But the truth is, they were shepherds, mystics, and nomadic warriors, sleeping under stars, wrestling with angels, and carrying tribal law on stone tablets. Abraham came from Ur, in Mesopotamia. Moses was raised in Egypt. Jesus was born in a town not far from modern-day Palestine. These were men of the sand, not the silk court. And yet, in just a few centuries, their identity was reshaped. Skin lightened, accents changed, and geographies blurred, until the original Israelites were almost unrecognizable to themselves. In the dusty corners of ancient Africa, in the oral chants of nomads, in the DNA of forgotten tribes, the memory remains. By the 8th century BCE, the Kingdom of Israel had splintered into two parts. The northern kingdom, made up of 10 tribes, fell under the growing shadow of the Assyrian Empire, an empire not known for mercy. In 722 BCE, the Assyrians invaded, conquered, and carried off the 10 tribes of the north. Men, women, and children, taken far from their lands, absorbed into distant provinces, never to return. These became the lost tribes of Israel. But they weren't lost to time, only lost to history books. A century and a half later, the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin suffered a similar fate. In 586 BCE, the mighty Babylonian Empire stormed Jerusalem, destroyed the first temple, and exiled the Judeans to Babylon. 2 captivities, 2 collapses, but out of this scattering, something powerful began. Over time, the remnants of Israel spread like sparks in the wind, reaching the corners of Africa, the sands of Arabia, the mountains of Persia, and even deep into the Indian subcontinent. They didn't disappear. They adapted. They survived. And across these far lands, they left behind breadcrumbs of their identity, fragments of an ancient covenant etched into custom, law, and ritual. From Sabbath-keeping in Africa, to circumcision rites among scattered tribes, to Torah-based oral law handed down across generations. These weren't coincidences, they were echoes, genetic memory embedded in culture. How does a people remain themselves when torn from land, temple, and name? The Israelites found a way, not through monuments, but through continuity of law and spirit. What was scattered was never lost, only hidden. By the 8th century, something unprecedented occurred in the heart of Eurasia. A nomadic empire known as the Khazars ruled over vast lands between the Black and Caspian Seas. Fierce, wealthy, and strategically positioned between the Islamic Caliphate and Christian Byzantium, they faced a dilemma. They were Turkic steppe people, tribal, polytheistic, and powerful. But as religious pressures from all sides mounted, the Khazar elite made a decision that would echo across history. They converted to Judaism. Not Islam, not Christianity, but Judaism. This was not a gradual conversion by grassroots communities. It was a state religion established by royal decree. The Khagan, their king, adopted the laws of Moses, the prophets, and the rituals of the Torah. But make no mistake, this was not a bloodline transformation, it was a religious realignment. Over centuries, as the Khazar Empire declined, many of its Jewish adherents migrated westward, settling in what is now Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, and Hungary. These groups evolved into what we now know as the Ashkenazi Jewish population. This fusion of steppe ancestry and Mosaic law formed an entirely new identity, one deeply committed to Judaism, but not ethnically descended from the tribes of Israel. Two controversial yet scholarly works brought this history into the light. Arthur Koestler's The 13th Tribe, Shlomo Sand's The Invention of the Jewish People. Both argue the same point, that a large portion of modern European Jewry are the religious descendants of Khazaria, not the ethnic heirs of Abraham. Spiritual conversion is not ethnic continuity, and that distinction reshaped the modern world. This distinction matters not to discredit anyone's faith, but to question how bloodline, prophecy, and political identity became entangled, because the modern world did not inherit the tribes of Israel. It inherited their name, their rituals, and their claim, but not necessarily their DNA. If the original Israelites were scattered, and another group assumed the mantle centuries later, then who truly are the chosen, and who was chosen to replace them? If the Khazar conversion represented a name without the bloodline, then the question becomes, where did the bloodline go? In the highlands of Zimbabwe and South Africa, a group known as the Lemba people preserve a legacy unlike any other. They follow dietary laws, observe the Sabbath, and claim descent from ancient Jewish priests. At first, no one believed them, until geneticists discovered something remarkable. A significant portion of Lemba males carry the Cohen genetic marker, a Y chromosome signature linked to the biblical priesthood of Aaron, not legend, not metaphor, bloodline. Further north, in the Ethiopian highlands, lived the Beta Israel, the House of Israel. Isolated for centuries, they kept the Torah alive, without modern contact. They practiced circumcision, Sabbath, kosher law, and Torah-based courts, all in Ge'ez, their ancient tongue. They didn't learn Judaism, they remembered it. In Nigeria, the Igbo people, often called Hebrews of West Africa, carry another mysterious link. Oral traditions trace their ancestry back to Jacob's sons, claiming descent from the tribes of Gad, Zebulun, and Ephraim. They observe circumcision on the 8th day, maintain dietary customs, and pass down the oral Torah, not through books, but through spoken law. But the echoes didn't stop in Africa. Across Arabia, India, and even into pre-Columbian Americas, fragments remained. Communities spoke of Moses. They practiced lunar calendars. They buried their dead facing Jerusalem. In some cases, they didn't even know why, only that it was passed down. Israel didn't vanish, it was absorbed. And those who retained the memory, who held the law in exile, were no longer called Israelites. They were called something else: lost, primitive, tribal, foreign. But what if they were never lost, only relabeled? The true tribes of Israel live on, not in the institutions of power, but in songs, in rituals, and in genetic whispers, waiting to be remembered. When the Renaissance swept through Europe, it brought art, philosophy, and architecture back to life, but it also brought something far more subtle: a recasting of sacred memory. Biblical figures, born under the sun-scorched skies of the Levant, were suddenly painted with ivory skin, blue eyes, and flowing brown hair. Middle Eastern shepherds and prophets were turned into European nobility. As Christianity spread westward, so did the image of God, reshaped in the likeness of kings, popes, and imperial vision. Western theology did more than teach the Bible, it reauthored it. In this retelling, prophecy was no longer Semitic, it became European. The message wasn't just spiritual, it was visual, cultural, and political. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Jewish identity itself was becoming more tied to European tradition, not ancient Semitic origin. Then came 1948. The world, still reeling from genocide and war, witnessed the birth of the modern state of Israel. A homeland was reborn, political, sovereign, backed by the Western powers. But was it a return of the bloodline, or the ascension of the converted tradition? The political state was real, the spiritual claim was bold, but the genealogical question remains. This isn't blame, this isn't an attack. It's a question of origins. Because origins matter when prophecy meets politics and belief is used to draw borders. The rewriting of prophecy was never just about history. It was about power, identity, and the ability to define the future by controlling the past. What happens when an identity becomes the key to prophecy? When lineage and a bloodline become the foundation for land rights, divine favor, and geopolitical dominion. In the ancient texts, in the Bible, in the Torah, the land of Israel was a covenant, a sacred inheritance passed down to a specific people. So the question isn't just who believes, it's who qualifies. If the true Israelites are scattered across Africa, Arabia, and South America, if their blood holds the markers, if their traditions echo Mount Sinai, then who really holds the covenant? This isn't just spiritual, it's legal, political, and historical, because if they are the inheritors, then the entire modern claim must be re-examined. But a new world was forming. After centuries of empire, colonization, and religious war, the narrative had to be stabilized. For the sake of peace, power, and profit, religious identity was used as a glue to justify land acquisition, fund wars, and claim spiritual superiority. The economic incentives were enormous, the political gains even more so. A nation can survive its fools, but it cannot survive treason from within. Cicero. So the story was preserved, rewritten where necessary, and protected by every institution invested in maintaining the illusion. But despite that, the flame never went out. The bloodline was never truly erased. It was renamed. It was forgotten. It was ignored. This isn't about removing anyone's heritage. It's not about erasing faith or revoking modern citizenship. It's about recognizing the parts of history we were never taught. The story of the Israelites didn't end in Europe. It continued in the deserts of Ethiopia, the forests of Nigeria, and the mountains of Peru. The lineage was never truly hidden. We were just never shown where to look. We are living in a time when the veil is thinning, when what was hidden in shadows is surfacing in light. This isn't a revolution of violence, it's a revolution of memory, a reclamation of history, not out of anger, but out of curiosity, longing, and the undeniable pull of truth. The question isn't who owns the past, it's who is ready to remember it. Because somewhere in the story of empires and religions, the root was buried. But roots don't die, they wait. The bloodlines are awakening, the memory is returning, and no power on earth can stop what has already begun. If you've felt the call, if something inside you resonates with this forgotten history, you may be part of the restoration. Truth is not lost. It's just waiting to be found. Subscribe for more decoding. This is only the beginning.